Hi, welcome to the very first week of Excel called Excel Create Workbooks. So I'm going to do a brief video here, well, not necessarily brief, probably be about a half an hour. I'm going to be taking you through all of the content that we would be covering off in week one of Excel. So a couple of things you need to be aware of. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the 10 steps in the textbook. So if you were to look, if you want to work with your textbook in conjunction with this, we're working through the 10 different skills. I may not follow those skills exactly as they are in the textbook, but that simply gives you another resource that you have available as you work through the content. So we're going to be working through them. Also, you have information available to you in Fanshawe Online. So if you were to go to week one in content, not week one, but to create workbooks and content, you will see there is detailed instructions there as well around the content that we're going to be covering off today. So normally what you would do is you would download a file from Fanshawe Online. In the Create Workbooks, there is no file to download. You're going to start with a blank Excel workbook. So if you want to work along with us, then with this demo or in the textbook, then open Excel and type into Excel what you see on the screen. So I'll work through a little bit of it. I've got it pre-built here so that we're not spending a lot of time doing typing, but you are going to want to have information in it similar to this. So let's just get started here. So I'm going to click in cell A1. So just as an understanding, when you're working within Excel, everything you type goes into a cell. So in a cell you can put a label. So as you can see in cell A1, we've got the label Aspen Falls Outdoor Recreation. In cell A2, we have the label Visitors, and so on. Labels are there so that the person who's reading your spreadsheet knows what the information pertains to. You can also, in a cell, you can put a number. As you can see here in cell B5, there's the number 3,169. So that number is telling us how many visitors attended the zoo for whatever time frame this spreadsheet is working on. 3,169 people went in on the weekends. 1,739 people were there on the weekdays. So you can put into a cell, you can put a label, you can put a number, or you can put a formula/function. Now we're going to put in formulas in a minute here. Formulas are how you take the base numbers and interpret them into a different way. One of the things that I think is really important when you're working with an Excel, and you should do this every time, every week as we're working through this, is try to understand exactly what the spreadsheet is trying to do. It doesn't make a lot of sense if you're just following along and putting in numbers but don't really have a base understanding of why you're doing that. In this particular case, the spreadsheet is keeping track of the number of visitors that are showing up at venues on the weekdays and weekends. We're going to calculate the total number of visitors. We're going to calculate the difference between weekend and weekday visitors. We're going to enter the entrance fees so that we can then calculate the total amount of money that we're making from each particular venue. And at the bottom of the columns, we're going to put in the total number of people that came on the weekdays, weekends, and so on and so forth. So the whole purpose of this spreadsheet is so that somebody can make decisions based on the numbers. Based on all these sets of numbers, you can help you to understand what sort of staffing you're going to have on weekends versus weekdays, how much the concessions are going to require in the way of food, utilities, just a whole myriad of different things that are dependent on the number of people that are coming in. You will also make future decisions. If we want to increase the number of visitors, what should we do? If the numbers of visitors are tailing off over a certain time frame, what's the cause of that? What can we do to fix that? And so on and so forth. So all of this, the whole point of Excel from the very beginning is to help people to make decisions, not just to enter numbers. Okay, so what we can see here is we've got all of these different numbers here. Sorry, I'll get rid of these. They shouldn't be there because I'm going to put those in a minute. Okay, and so what we want to have in here is the total number of visitors that are coming in. So to calculate our total number of visitors, what we are going to do is we're going to add the contents of the weekends plus the weekdays. So one of the key concepts of Excel is something called relative reference and relative addressing. So relative reference simply means that when you're working with an Excel and you create a formula or a function, you're not adding numbers. I'm not adding 3,169 plus 1,739. What I'm adding is the contents of cell B5 to the contents of cell C5. What this means is that for this particular week it's those two sets of numbers, but maybe a month from now or whatever time frame you're working within this spreadsheet, those numbers will change. But your formula, the relationship stays the same. The total number of visitors is the total of the weekends plus the weekdays. All right, so to enter a formula in Excel, you have to tell Excel first that what you're entering is a formula or a function. If you don't tell it by putting an equal sign in first, then Excel will treat the information as either a label or a number, depending on if it's a label. If it's got an alphanumeric in it, it'll be treated as a label, otherwise it's a number. So we're going to start the formula by hitting the equal sign. So the equal sign tells us that we are now starting to enter a formula. In my particular case, I want to add the contents of B5 plus C5. So I could simply type in B5 plus C5, and I would have my formula, and if I hit enter, it would give me the result. However, there is a faster way to do that, so I'm going to do it a different way. So I'm going to start again with the equal sign, but instead of typing in the cell references, I'm going to point to them. So I'm going to say B5. When I point to B5, you can see that it puts it up here in the, this is called the formula bar. This keeps track of the formula that's in a particular cell. And I can see that I've got that dotted border around the outside of the cell. That's called a marquee border. And what that simply means is that as long as you've got a dashed border, it hasn't actually accepted it until you tell it that you're done. If I move to a different cell, the border moves. You can see now my reference in my formula changes to B8. If I go over to here, it changes to C6 and so on. So it's only after you have told the Excel that you're done that it'll actually cement it into the formula. And I tell it that I'm done by either hitting enter or tab, which is the same as saying I'm done and move on to the next cell, or I can put in a math operator, so plus, minus, and so on and so forth. So in this case, I'm going to hit the plus sign. As soon as I hit the plus sign, you can see that the border has changed to a solid line, and I'm now moving into the next part of my formula, and I'm going to point to C5. Again, you can see the dash border around the outside that tells me that this is just an Excel trying to anticipate. When I'm done, I'm going to hit enter to say that I'm finished. Okay, so when I go back to here, you can see there's my formula, B5 and C5. This also brings up another concept that's quite important to understand. In Excel, the formula bar up here gives you the underlying value of a cell. In other words, it gives you what's actually in the cell. In the cell itself, what I get is the displayed value. The displayed value is the results of the formula. And this is quite critical to you as you're moving along in the spreadsheet, because if you're copying something or you're working with something, it's important that you realize that what you're dealing with is the underlying value, not the displayed value. So if I was to copy my D5 someplace else in the spreadsheet, I'm not going to get 4,908. I'm going to get something different because I'm only actually copying the formula, and we'll come back to that in a minute. All right, so let's calculate the formula for the differences. So the differences, again, I start with the equal sign, and I'm going to take my weekend visitors minus my weekday visitors, and I'll hit enter to tell it that I'm done. So in Excel, when you're finished entering information into a cell, you hit the enter key, it'll accept the value and move down to the next row. You can hit the tab key, which will accept the value and move to the next column. I can use the check boxes up here, I'll show you in a minute. Alright, so let me put the entrance fee in. So I'm going to say that the entrance fee for the zoo is $10, and the entrance fee for the aquarium is $12, and the entrance fee for the garden is $5, and the entrance fee for the museum is, let's say, $15. Okay, so now I want to calculate my total fees. Well, my total fees is simply my all visitors multiplied by my entrance fee. Okay, so I'm going to create my formula. So I'm going to say equals all visitors multiplied by the asterisk my entrance fee, and I hit enter and I have a new value. Okay, so what I have created here is I have a number in this cell, I have a number in this cell, I have a number in this cell, and I have a formula in this cell, the formula B5 plus C5. I have a formula in this cell and a formula in this cell. Okay, so now we're going to come across another term in Excel called relative referencing. And what relative referencing means is that when you copy a formula it takes the formula and it changes it based on how you're copying it. So as an example, if I take a look here for the zoo, the total number of visitors is the weekend visitors plus the weekday visitors. So B5 plus C5. So if I want the aquarium total, it's a very similar formula. Here's my formula for the zoo, B5 plus C5. So the formula here for the aquarium is simply one row down. B5 plus C5 is the zoo. Well, B6 plus C6 is the aquarium. So rather than recreating the formula, I'm going to take advantage of Excel's relative referencing to copy and paste the formula. So I could simply click here. I could click up here on copy, and I could click here on paste, and it would paste my formula. So now it's B6 plus C6 because of relative referencing. I'm going to undo that and do it a different way. So copy and paste. So basically just understanding relative referencing. What relative referencing says is that when you copy a formula, when you paste it, it will take a look at the starting position and the ending position, and it will adjust your formula relative to that. So in this case, I'm copying from B5 or from D5 to D6. So I'm going down one row, which means that in this case, my formula here is going to increase by one row. So B5 is going to become B6, and C5 is going to become C6. So I could have done that with copy and paste. I could do a Control C, Control V, or I could right click and bring up the shortcut menu, and I could do a copy here, and I could go down to here, and I could do a paste. But there is a faster way, and that's this button here called the fill handle. And the fill handle is down at the bottom right hand corner of the cell. And what the fill handle it does is basically it just copies and pastes. So if I click and hold my mouse button down, you can see at the bottom of the screen where it says drag outside selection to extend series or fill. When I copy down, when I drag down, it creates, it's the same as if I did a copy in this cell and pasted it to this cell, and then pasted it to this cell, and then pasted it to this cell. So if you look at your formulas here, my B5 to plus C5 has become B6 plus C6, has become B7, whoops, has become B7 plus C7, and has become B8 plus C8. So relative addressing has copied that formula and changed the reference. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to click, I'm going to drag my fill handle down to copy that, and I'm going to do the same thing here, and I'm going to drag my fill handle to copy that down. Okay, so now by using the fill handle, I've sped up the amount of time it takes me to create this spreadsheet quite a bit. Okay, so now let's put in my totals here. So in here I want the total for all of these cells. So the total of my zoo, aquarium, garden, and museum. I want that total to show up here in B9. So I could do a formula. I could say equals this plus this plus this plus this, and I could have the result show up. But there's a faster, better way to do that, and that's to use a function. So functions are pre-built formulas. If I click up here in the Formula tab, you can see there's all my different functions. So there's this AutoSum button here, or Insert Function, there's AutoSum, recently used, and then Financial Functions, Logical Text, Date and Time, and others here as well. So somewhere within those is the sum function. I could also go here to Insert Function, and then it'll show me all my most recently used functions. In this case, I would type in sum and hit enter, and there's my sum function. So I could use it that way. Or I could go and I can simply type it in. I can say equals SUM bracket, and then I click to highlight my range and end bracket. So while I've got this visible to you, let's talk about what makes up a function. A function always starts with the equal sign. A function will always have the name, and it has to be exact. So it has to be sum, S-U-M. And then a function will always have a set of brackets. And then inside those brackets are arguments. And the arguments are basically what the sum is going to calculate. So in this particular case, I've created a sum function that adds the B5 up to and including B8. That's a range of cells, the range of B5 to B8. When you're creating a range, you enter the top left and the bottom right corner. So if I had done B5 to G8, then it would add all the numbers in the whole spreadsheet. But in this case, this is fine. So if I was to hit enter now, it would accept that sum or that formula, and it would create the total. Understanding with arguments within a function, you separate the arguments with commas, and the arguments within a function can be either a cell, a range of cells, a number, could be another function altogether. It can be a constant, like a formula, like 2 times 3, whatever. Every individual function will be evaluated, and then they'll all be added together to give you your total. So when I hit enter here, you can see again, so there's my displayed value, 21,810, and there's my underlying value, the sum, the function, the sum B5 to B8. All right, so now can I use the fill handle to copy that across? Absolutely, because here's my formula, the sum of B5 to B8. If I copy that one to the right, it's going to change it to, the B is going to be changed to a C, and then to a D, and an E, and an F, and a G. Now I'm not going to total the differences because that's meaningless, and I'm not going to total the entrance fees. So I'm going to copy the formula from here to here. So there's my formula, sum of B5 to B8, and I copy it one to the right, so it changes it to C5 to C8 and D5 to D8. Now over here I'm going to do it slightly differently. So instead of typing in the function, because the sum function is the most commonly used function in Excel, we're going to use a shortcut called autofill. All right, so AutoSum, it's available on the Formulas tab here, or I can go to the Home tab, and over here is AutoSum as well. When you click on the AutoSum button, what it will do is it'll fill in the word sum, so it creates the function equals sum bracket, and it'll automatically guess at the range that you want. And you can tell that by the dotted or the dash border around the outside of the cells. All right, so in this case it says, I think what you want is the sum of G5 to G8. And if that's true, which in this case it is, I could simply hit enter to tell it that I'm done. If it's not correct, however, I can simply change the range to something different. So the way the AutoSum function works, whatever cell you're in, when you enter that function, it'll add any numbers above that function up until it hits a blank line or a heading or something to tell it that that's probably where you want it to stop. If there's nothing above it, it will look to the left. So if I wanted to add all the way across, I could click in a particular cell, hit the AutoSum function, and if there were no numbers above, it would try to add them to from the left. And if there were no numbers anywhere, it would simply put in the word equals sum, and then you would highlight the range to have it happen. So in this case, I'm going to click OK, and there's my total. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to take these headings, Zoo through Museum, I want to copy those, and I want to paste them down here under % of weekdays. So I'm going to highlight that range, and I could either go up under the Home tab and click the Copy button, or I could highlight the range and I could right-click and click Copy, or I could do a Control-C. And then I go to where I want to paste it, and I just have to be in the very top left corner. I don't have to highlight the whole range, and I can paste. And it will simply copy the values and paste them here. Okay. So now what I want in here is the % of weekday visitors. So I want to know, of these visitors, how many are of all the visitors. So let's look at the zoo for now. All visitors were 4,908, of which 1,739 were weekday. So if I want to calculate the percentage, I want to know what percentage of 4,908 is 1,739. And to do that, I create a simple formula, equals my weekday numbers divided by the total. And when I enter that, I get a formula that shows as 0.354319. Understand that within Excel, it will always store all your numbers to 15 points of precision, and behind the scenes it's always going to be to that. But normally you don't want to show numbers to 15 points, so what we're going to use is something called a format. So let's talk a bit about formats as well. So what formats are simply how Excel displays the contents of a cell. So behind the scenes, that number is always going to be stored to 15 points. But if you don't want it to display that way, you can apply a format to that number to have it change. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to Cell Styles, and down here you can see I've got a cell style called %. I'm going to click on that, and you're going to see it's going to show me as 35%. Now remember, the original number is 0.35 blah blah blah, but when I multiply it by 100 and put the % sign on it, so the format has changed it to that. I want to actually have a couple of decimal points, so I'm going to go up here to increase decimals. I click it once for 1, I click it a second time for 2. I could have also gone up here and changed it to percentage format here, or I could have clicked on the percentage format button here, which would also give me a percentage format. You're going to find that within Excel there's always 2 or 3 different ways to do something. So now that I've done that, I can take my fill handle and copy it down. So a couple of things to remember when you're working with formats. When I told you originally that a cell can contain a label, a number, a formula, or a function. That's one of the things that it contains. But cells also contain the formats for that cell, and the formats are separate to the value. So if I hit the delete button on a cell, I'll delete the contents, but the formats will remain. So as an example here, if I was to go in and delete that, and I put the format back, or the formula back in, you can see that the % format stayed. Okay, so when you delete a cell, the formats remain. If you want to delete everything, you have to go up to the Home tab, click on the little eraser here, and you would have to click on Clear All to delete both the contents and the formats. Okay, so while we're at it, let's talk a little bit more about formatting. So in here, I've got a cell that's got the words Aspen Falls Outdoor Recreation. Now remember, when I said about underlying versus displayed value, my underlying value here is Aspen Falls Outdoor Recreation, and the displayed value is the whole thing. But if I click on cell B1, you can see that the underlying value here is actually blank. And that's because when you have a label, if the cell next to a label is not being used, Excel will allow the value to carry over. If you did put something in B1, it would truncate the value in A1 to just display what's available within that particular cell. I want my headings to display across the whole worksheet, so I'm going to select my range A1 to G1, and on the Home tab I'm going to click on this button called Merge and Center. And what Merge and Center does is it makes the cell A1 cover all the cells from A to G. So effectively now there is no B1, C1, D1, E1, and so on in this spreadsheet. There is just one cell called A1. I'll do the same thing for visitors. And then I can also go up here to cell styles, and there are a number of styles that I can apply to a particular to this particular cell to give it some color. So you can see I've got heading 1, so you can see as you hover over top of each one it displays it. I'm not sure if this is working in the demo, but when you see it, it'll work. And so you can then pick a particular cell style. Alright, so these are themed cell styles, these are titles and headings, and so on and so forth. So let's just pick this one here, and I'll go here, and I'll go to cell style, and I'll pick, say, this one here, and we're done with that. Alright. Alright, so a couple more things to work through. What I want to do is I want to change the width of a cell. So by default, when you create a worksheet, all of the cells are 8.43 points in width. Not that that means anything to you, but that's just the way they are. You can change the column width easily within Excel. Now this is one of the situations where a Mac is different than a PC. In a Mac, let me show you in a PC first. So here's column, there's that cell. So I want to make this a little bit wider just to make it stand out a bit better. I can right click on a particular cell and I can go down here to, let's do it over here. So I can go here to Format, there's column width, and I could say change this to 10. So that's one way to change a column. I could also go up to the top to the column itself, so at the letter A, right click, go to column width and change the cell. But you can't do that with a Mac. If you have a Mac and you were to use that, the buttons are there, but if you were to select it, what it will do is it will set it up into whatever, either centimeters or inches, depending on how your computer is set up. So where I just changed this to 10, you can see how the size is. If you have a Mac and you changed it to 10, it can be the whole width of a page because it's 10 inches. So you've got to be very careful. The only way to change a column width in a Mac to match what's required for your grader assignments is to click the border between the two cells. So you can see when I move between column A and column B, I get this little cursor that looks like a line with two arrows in it. If I click, I'll get a little pop-up that says there's the width, 1075 pixels. I can click and drag to change that width to something different. And that's the only way you can do it on a Mac. Okay, now I also want to change the widths of the rest of these cells, but rather than do them all individually, I'm going to select all of these columns. So by doing that, I click up here at the very top, which selects the whole column all the way to the bottom of the spreadsheet. Click, hold my mouse button down, and drag across so they're all selected. Now, in Excel, it's no different than Word or whatever you've worked on in the past. So if you're in Word and you're typing a letter and you want to bold your headings, you highlight the headings first and then you hit the bold button, and everything you have highlighted is then bolded. The same thing, the same concept is in play in Excel. So once that I've got these columns all selected, I can click and drag one column. So let's see, I'm going to make them all 10, drag and release, and they all change to 10. I could have also right-clicked, gone to column width, changed it to 10, or I could have gone up here to format column width and changed it to 10. All of those will work. Okay. All right. So now another thing here. So right now I have a formula in here, which is the sum of B5 to B8. Okay. So there's my function. Sum B5 to B8. There's the range of cells that it's currently adding up. I want to add a new venue. So let's say I forgot to put in the swimming pool. So I'm going to add a new line just right here after aquarium and before garden. To do that, I'm going to click on the cell. I'm going to go up here to the Insert command on the Format tab, on the Home tab, and I'm going to click Insert Sheet Row. So when you insert a new row or a new column in Excel, Excel has to take what's currently in that row and move it out of the way to make room for your new column. So when you insert a row, it will always insert the row below wherever you happen to be. If you insert a column, it'll always insert the column to the right. And that's because it's got to take what was currently there and move it out of the way. So what used to be in cell B7 has been moved down to cell B8. Now that means that my original formula, the sum total that was in there before, which said the sum of B5 to B8, but B8 has now become B9, so it had to change that formula. And every time you make a change in the spreadsheet that can affect a cell address, it will check a look for that cell address in every formula and function in the whole spreadsheet and change it. And that works really well to your advantage here, because now what I want to do, I'm going to type in here pool, and I'm going to say we have 2,000 weekend visitors and 1,000 weekday visitors. Okay, so by putting that in, notice that my total changed, because what used to say the sum of B5 to B8 now says the sum of B5 to B9, because B8 has changed. So my formula, my sum functions now give me the correct sums for all of the values that I've used. I can go in here, I can highlight these two, because remember this is that adds the weekends to the weekdays, so that's the B6 to C6, and there's the differences, which is weekends minus the. I'm going to highlight both of them, grab my fill handle and drag it down, which again, because of relative referencing, it takes the formula, so B6 plus C6 becomes B7 plus C7, B6 minus C6 becomes B7 minus C7. I'm going to have to enter a number for the entrance fees, and I can again use the fill handle to copy that formula down. Okay, so the final thing we're going to look at are headers and footers. So headers and footers will display at the top or the bottom of a spreadsheet when you print it. They will not display when you're in normal view. If you go down to the bottom of your spreadsheet, you can see at the bottom you've got three different view buttons. So there's normal view, there's page layout view, which is what the spreadsheet's going to look like when it prints, and then there's page break preview, which shows you where your page breaks are. We're going to go back to page layout, and here you can see that I've got a header. So there's my left, my center, and my right. Now I've already got the heading in here, but I'm going to delete that. So what I want to do in here is I want the name of the spreadsheet to show up in here. When I'm in a header, I'm going to get a brand new menu here called, where the hell is it? the headers and footer tools. You can't really see it because it's hidden over here underneath my name. But in there I've got this thing called header and footer elements. So the header and footer elements, you see I've got one called page number, number of pages, and I'm not sure if these are showing up in the demo. So if you just move your cursor over top of each one, you'll see it display. I want the file name to show up in here. You cannot just type the file name. The file name shows at the top of the worksheet, so it's called Book 1. But if I type that in, it'll be marked wrong in my IT lab. What you have to do is you have to enter a file name element. So once I'm clicking the header, I click here where it says file name up in the header and footer elements, and ampersand file shows up in my workbook. So now what I've got is my file name is showing. So if I click off of it, you can see it shows Book 1. If I want to add something to the footers, and again I've already got pre-populated data, so I'll get rid of those. If I want the date over here, I'm going to click here on current date. If I want the page number here, I'm going to type page, colon, space, and then I'll type in page number, and it'll actually display the page number. So just remember, when you're working with headers and footers, you want to use the header and footer elements that display in the header and footer tools dialog tab. Okay, and I think that should be it. I'm going to go back to normal view. Now when I'm in normal view, you will now see dashes that show on the sides of the screen. So basically the dashes are over here between columns H and I. Those dashes simply tell you that when you printed, if you were to print this spreadsheet, everything to the left of the dashes would print on page 1, everything to the right of the dashes would print on page 2. If I scroll down, I'll have dashes further down in the spreadsheet, wherever they are. They're not showing. Okay. Anyway, there would be dashes here that show me where the bottom page is, and then I could print that as well. Okay, so basically that is our week 1. Hopefully you find this beneficial. If there's any comments or questions about it, by all means just email me, and thank you very much. Bye.